right. By the way, we'll try and make sure, I think, that there'll be links to all of these people in descriptions of the videos and things like that, so that you can go and find the amazing work that's happening at Runway, or just follow up with these people, find them on Twitter, see what's coming next. Okay, and speaking of keeping up with things, our final guest for the evening or morning, wherever you are, is Apolinário Passos. Apolinário is a machine learning engineer, or machine learning art engineer, I believe is the title, at Hugging Face. And he's also an artist who focuses on generative art and generative media. And for me, the platform that he founded, multimodal.art, and the accompanying Twitter account and things, it's just a really amazing resource in terms of, especially for people who are trying to keep up with the space but don't necessarily have time to be, tracking all of these different sources. Apolinário has done a really great job of bringing the community together and kind of curating and keeping track of what's happening and sharing that with people with a very infectious enthusiasm. So really great to have you here, Apolinário, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what comes after the hype.
You're muted, Polly.
Sorry, hi everyone. Thanks for the introduction. And so I'm here to talk about how diffusion models are cool. I think we've been through many talks that show how they're cool. And there's a lot of a generative media hype right now. I think more and more people are jumping. People are raising kind of big rounds by implementing these technologies. There's lots of low-hanging fruits. A lot of people jumping into this space. This is amazing. So I'd like to give a panorama and look into the future a little bit, of course, with our sparse knowledge. This first image here is actually an analogy of diffusion models that I like to make. Because if we think about diffusion models, when you start from random noise and you end up into an image, it's kind of like this quotation by Michelangelo that in the block of stone, he removes everything that is not stone to make the angel, right? And this quotation is false, of course, like everything on the internet, but I still like the analogy, so that's why I include this image every talk I make. I have this slide here to go very quickly on how diffusion models work, just to give a ground. But I think the GIF is already played, so So basically, the way diffusion models work on a very high level is that you train a model to go from signal to noise. You add noise to an image, so you go into this direction, and then you train the model to go back into the other direction. So from random noise, it kind of finds the image behind the noise. If you want to learn more, of course, you can join the diffusion models course. That is the motivation of this whole event here. But before talking about the future, I'd like to talk a little bit about the past. Before software, creative media required manual and ultra specialized work to come to life, right? Like film editing required someone literally with a scissor cutting the film, right? And then gluing them together. And you had like quite skilled people that would actually glue them together in very specific ways or do seamless cuts. And this was a skill, this was a profession, this was just a required step for making film, right? Like you had the film, you had to cut it, you had to like process it, and there was no way around it until software, right? Like when you think about software, when you think about computers, and we can think of all the revolution that was brought up, but with software, essentially, skilled professionals can bring creative works to life faster, right? So the idea that someone might have thought of cutting it could not be applicable, and now it is, and way more cutting and editing techniques are available because of this, and this allows for huge productions with a lot of visual effects that were only dreams of the techniques that were manual or that were not digital, that were analog. And when the barrier of entry lowered, a creative explosion arose. So I took this chart of movies released per year, and I found like the year that digital cameras and the Adobe Premiere were kind of, I said invented, but it's really like released, digital cameras and the Adobe Premiere. And we can see a creative explosion, right? So basically you had a limited amount of people that could do film, that could produce creative output in the film format. And with the digital revolution, essentially everyone can, with access to a camera and to a computer, could learn the skill, but it's still a skill that you have to learn. But we can see that way more films were produced. So maybe the person that had the profession of cutting the film actually potentially that job became very niche, but the overall film editing profession grew way more, right? Um, so, well, what if instead of days it took seconds to, or and minutes to create? And everyone, I think, watching this talk may be familiar that DALL-E showed the world text to image was possible, but that was just the beginning. Stable Diffusion showed the potential of this technology when it goes open source, and how it can be simplified with libraries like diffusers. And now we're in an era of a community customization of models. So people are doing Dream Boost, textual inversion, and other techniques. And in less than 1 hour, you can train a model. And yeah, there's even a newer technique that you can train in only one image called Dream Artist. So it's a pretty nice way to customize the model. So that gives us a glimpse on the fact that these models are open source released and the community has jumped in and now people are customizing it on different things. And yeah, I also recommend to watch this video by Corridor Digital. It's very cool. They essentially use Dream Boost and a bunch of other visual techniques to create the Spider-Man from Spider-Verse into the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. So this also gives a glimpse on how this could be used professionally in the future. But I would like to get a bit into some of the philosophical debates, if I may. And I really like this kind of Twitter thread. It's a bit old if you think about, if you see it, April 8th, but I think it's still interesting. In one hand, we have someone saying that DALL-E broke their heart because, in this person's perspective, this kind of technique of text to image and broader would destroy visual art because basically it would essentially create so much of it that we wouldn't be able to differentiate beauty or to differentiate uh, yeah, like the he even gives the analogy of the more destructive than what the internet did to music, right? So from this person's perspective, essentially just by creating an unlimited-ish amount of pretty images or images that are tuned to our brain to find catchy, right? In the same way a music is catchy, for some people may not correlate to it being good. Some people are worried that by making catchy or very beautiful looking images instantly, we would overload the world with beauty. And when everything's beautiful, nothing is beautiful, right? So there is one side of this debate. And on the other side of this debate, there is Claire Silver, which is a digital artist that also uses generative models, that says that actually these tools allow for creativity without the barrier of skill that makes everyone an artist, essentially. So saying that the skill and the labor and the work is not the soul of art. The soul of art is the creative expression, and these models enable everyone to express themselves creatively. Right? I think those are two sides of an argument that exist in the world. And I won't take sides on this particular slide because I think it's worth for people to reflect on. Because in one hand, I do think that when this is used on advertisement industry, we'll see a saturation of beauty, let's put it that way. But on the other hand, I do think that empowering people to create is amazing. Yeah. So yeah, and I think on the same capacity, another big debate there is whether this technology will create more jobs or it will remove more jobs. I bring this creating more jobs here because a lot of people are talking about so many professions that could potentially be replaced by this kind of technology. But I re-invite everyone to look at this chart again, because in the same way, I think that when digital cameras and Adobe Premiere came together, this exploded the production of things, right? I do think that when this technology is matured enough to be on everyone's devices, there's so many new content, new productions being made that a whole new industry might boom. And in the same way that YouTube, for example, is a platform where people can kickstart their own thing and reach an audience, I believe that an analogous process or a curve even more exponential than this could just create way more a whole new economy, right? So maybe in the same way that the job of the person cutting the film disappeared, but the overall video editing jobs actually got way more. I do think that even if we don't know the names or how to frame them yet, that just the creative explosion this is bringing about and how much more content can be produced, how many more people can express themselves, would lead to potentially more jobs in this overall economy, despite maybe some operational processes being challenged in a way. But at the same time, it's kind of unavoidable that this technology is getting embedded into tools that designers use. So I do think that it's a co-creation process that in some areas may need slightly less professionals, but overall I think it can boom a new economy with more people participating than before. And yeah, I think overall it's just a radically different world we're going to live in, because yeah, imagine the kids saying that we were so old that computers didn't even know how to draw when we grew up, right? So when this is baseline, right, when this technology is the basis for things, when this is obvious that computers can do it, we will start operating on other layers, right? So right now, this technology is impressive to us. We want to improve it. We want to make video. We want to make audio. Once this is like baseline, we'll not be thinking so much about the medium, right? I think a lot of this technology is about the medium, and you do like a frog jumping from a building with the clothes of Superman, just because you want to make sure. Like, I think these crazy prompts are in part us wanting to make sure that those images were not in the data set, right? Like that it's really creating. And but once we overcome that and we really use this into our creative process, there is a radically different world, I believe, that is about to come. And I'm taking a few wild guesses here about what could potentially come. And one thing that we can see converging is automatic script generation with the language models, and then video generation as well. So you can imagine a script being written by an AI, and then the script becoming a whole video animation by an AI, and then all the voices, acting also being generated by an AI. And if we combine this together, you could think of a Netflix that is custom. Right, so we could think of something like you have TV shows or series that are generated for you, right? And some people may think that's amazing. Some people may think that's horrible. Some people may think, oh, this will create even echo chambers of size 1, right? But I do think that that this is a possibility that we could have generative, customized, and maybe even together. Let's say you and your partner. It makes a TV show that both of you like, so it's like combines the tastes of the two of you, or a group of friends. So yeah, I think the possibilities are endless, but I do think that auto-generated, end-to-end content based on your taste is something that could be in the horizon, and for some is utopia, hedonistic utopia, and for others can be like a nightmare. So up to you, but I think something in this capacity could exist. Another one is, and by the way, this image was generated by Stable Diffusion 2, so quite like it. I do think that social media will have to look radically different to support a world where everyone is creating, right? Like imagine just the volume of content created by the imagination of people with these tools. I'm not sure that the current social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or even like the messaging apps like WhatsApp would support not support technically. Maybe they could increase their bandwidth, but I'm talking about UX UI. Like, would the platforms that exist today be compatible with a world where everyone is creating, everyone is being creative? I think not, and I think new platforms would. If the current platforms don't adapt, they could be leapfrogged by new platforms that have this in their core, right? So I think that's something that we will have to see. But it's another point that I believe could make sense in the future. And yeah, I would like to and here to open for questions and to ask what you create, and happy to take questions from the audience and also reflect a little bit on the points that I brought.
Awesome. Thanks, Paulie, for this provocative talk. There's a question here it's more of a comment than maybe a question, but we can turn it into a question. So it's from Shubham, who says, at some point we can imagine that, these sort of generated images are going to be almost as good or indistinguishable from, the ones that humans have made. And I guess it's sort of asking, maybe one, does it matter? And two, do we want to sort of aim or optimize for a future where that is the case? Or, what's your thoughts on the future of a lot of, say, Google search suddenly now returning generated images versus, human generated ones?
Yeah, I think that's a very provocative question. And I would say there is a twofold answer to it. One is that indeed, I think very soon we'll be failing this Turing test of whether or not what we're seeing is an AI generated image or a real picture. Although I think our brains are very good at being adversarial in that, so I think it will be a bit of a cat and rat catch game for a bit, but I do think at the end it will blend in. But I do believe that actually, and it's a bit of a side tangent from the question, but I do believe that there is a side to this, which is I do think that new art styles by humans will emerge on the figures of these models. So basically, we can think of what can Stable Diffusion not do. Hands, right? So let's say drawing hands grows in popularity or something like that. Of course, hands is a dumb example, but I do believe that there will be a bit of an adversarial game between human artists and this AIs, and we might see, because once the AI generated content is everywhere, media, advertising, Google search, etc., I do think this will create an opportunity for artists to say, how can I create something that is radically different from the entire universe of what this AIs can do? And I think there will be a set that is outside of that, right? That humans could explore, at least temporarily. Then someone goes and trains the AI into that whatever new thing, and it becomes like a game. But I do believe that if we get saturated, people will try to overcome the saturation, be it with human created stuff or AI created stuff. But I wouldn't say we should. I mean, I do think that as humans are very adaptable to things in a way, in the sense of it can be like some people can if we cannot distinguish, it's the end of things. Like we've heard this kind of doomsday prophecies before, and they may have some truth to them, but I do think we're very adaptable, and once we take it as true that okay, like generative art, media, and real photos are now indistinguishable. In the same way that Photoshop artists can do really indistinguishable images from real ones, and we still have like social cues to distinguish things, like very unlikely a reputable newspaper will publish a photoshopped image of a real event, right? I think we will create social structures to make sure that the source of things and where things come from and who posted it and how this came about Yeah, so I'm not too worried about that, but I do think that we need to socially build the structures together, because it's not only about the output, right? It's about the whole infrastructure.
Yeah, totally. And we saw in Devi's talk actually this discussion about, the data set and how do you construct data sets that are in, some way fair to the artists. And it's like a kind of sociological question, right? So I have another question maybe from myself, which is one of the things that's like surprising about diffusion models is that for someone like myself who lives in Transformer land, it kind of came out of nowhere. So, I was happily going along with large language models, NLP, and now a little bit of multimodal stuff. And then boom, stable diffusion kind of lands, right? And there were these like hints of like, Clip and Glide. And of course we knew DALL-E from OpenAI. And the question I have for you is like, why do you think it took so long, so to speak, to go from like, these sort of original diffusion papers, some of them which I think are quite old, like, maybe even 10 years, to get to where we are now? Because it doesn't seem like it was like, oh, we needed like, the transformer or something to make this work. It's more like, this kind of Frankenstein combination of existing tools. And I was just curious what you thought on that. Is like, was it a surprise to you as someone who's been in the generative art scene? You saw this coming, or was it something that also, kind of surprised you?
Yeah, so I think the first paper that I know of for diffusion models is from 2016, which is like ages ago on this space, right? And it's very interesting because it was like an exploratory process of, oh, we can use this technique from thermodynamics, because yeah, diffusion models like are called diffusion models because of gas diffusions, right? Like some people may not be aware of that, but um, when like basically in the original diffusion models paper, they train the model to like basically take a 2D plane and imagine if a gas was like spreading from an S shape from this 2D plane, and like train it to go back to the shape, because gases are chaotic in nature, right? Like usually they go everywhere. So denoising this process is hard. And they try to use it as a machine learning technique. And it was kind of like a cool experiment, got some traction at the time, but it didn't perform better than anything that was state of the art at the time. So it went kind of dormant. And then I think it revived around 2019 with Jonathan Ho's paper on DBIM, and essentially that recreated interest into it. And I think it was kind of so yeah, I think there was like this small winter, let's say, of like 3 years, little interest. But since this paper, I think the interest picked up. And because I think in this paper it was already a bit competitive to what GANs would do and how GANs would work. So I do think this technique was like not necessarily with transformers, but like a bit with the GANs. But I do think that what transformed kind of everything in this space was the DALL-E 1 blog post and code and paper, because I think just the framework that you could condition generative models in general in text was something that was explored very minimally, and no one really thought it was anywhere close to being like high quality, right? Like to type in a text and fully generate the image. Like maybe you could drive in some directions, and some people are thinking of this with GANs, like style GANs and stuff. But really, the release of Clip and the general OpenAI thing of DALL-E transformed this I think, and it kind of created I think like Robin's and Patrick's work, like VQGAN combined with Clip, and then images started being generated. And then OpenAI picked up on the diffusion model work for with their paper called Diffusion's BitGAN on image synthesis, and that brought a lot of attention. And then, yeah, people from the generative media community, like Catherine Crowson, hooked together this model, right? Like the diffusion and Clip, And this clip-guided diffusion process showed that diffusion had a lot of potential for generative media, and then OpenAI picked up from that with the Glide, and then DALL-E 2, and the Google and Stable Diffusion also picked up on those works. So I do believe that there was a convergence in time. But yeah, I think it's like with many of the things in science are a bit mimetic in the sense of the ideas that pick up because of other ideas. And yeah, the technique was there, dormant, but I think it emerged in the time where it made sense also from GPU. Some people even say it arrived too early, in a sense, because we, like, if we were in a new iteration of GPUs when this technique existed, this could have seen a different explosion because more people could train it on their own hardware, because it's like it's not accessible to train. So this creates like a scenario that we see where big organizations, even if they're nice big organizations like Hugging Face or Stability AI that train things for open source, still, not that other big organizations are not nice, but just the ones that release things open source versus not, but you still require, like, you cannot train state-of-the-art model in your house like you could do with a GAN, right? So I think it came into the right time where it was possible to make a model with the quality that existed. So it, in a way, kind of balances out. Like, even with neural networks, right? Like, there's a lot of people asking me this question on why it took so long to pick up, given this always existed in computer science history. But
yeah, I guess it's like the thing we were talking with David, that, you know, the criteria is, can it run on Colab? And that's like a great, you know, unlocking of you know, use and creativity.